Hey MMT followers, Christina Fuges with MoldMaking Technology for another quick MMT chat. My guest today is Marion Wells, who I've worked with now on several workforce development projects over the past 2 years now. Marion is a talent development consultant, an owner and founder of Human Asset Management, or HAM, as we like to call it, which offers services focused on talent development, organizational strategies, program management, and sales and marketing improvement for the small to mid-sized manufacturer. So it's right up our alley in MoldMaking Technology. She's based in the Chicago area, and Marion is one of MMT's newest editorial advisory board members, who I introduced back in January. So before we get into a conversation, for anybody out there who's not familiar with our EAB or who may be interested in serving on the board in the future, in a nutshell, the editorial advisory board is a 12-person panel that helps to guide the direction of the brand's content, because they have boots on the ground and they're in the field. So I lean on them for their insights on trends and technology. So anybody out there who might be interested, please reach out to me at cfuges@gardnerweb.com. All right, so let's get into today's topic. So Mary and I, we've tackled a survey to find out the current state of workforce development, particularly in mold making. We presented a presentation sharing the results, as well as strategies for upping your workforce development game back at AmeriMold 2019. And more recently, we tackled mentoring with a cross-generational mentorship pilot program whose participants and the outcome was featured during AmeriMold Connects, our virtual event back in June, which I'm going to post online next month, so look for that. And then COVID hit, right? So, and it wasn't presenting new workforce development challenges per se, but as Marion put it to me the other day, COVID has accelerated the need to address these challenges. And one in particular is mental health of your workforce, you know, amidst this new normal. And this is real. I've heard a lot of people groan when they hear the term, the new normal. I think I'm one of them at this point. So Mary and I are going to try to frame this catchphrase, you know, in a new light, a positive light that focuses on opportunity, the opportunity to better the workforce and the opportunity to develop a better way to get the job done. So Marion, how do you define the new normal in manufacturing, or has, as you have described it to me, the future working pattern of manufacturing as a result of COVID?
I think that your description about what I said about the future is probably the best way to describe it. I think that generally speaking, companies were on a path towards the future anyway. Okay, they were already getting into the planning mode. They were already looking at their workforce. They were already looking at how they manufacture. They were even looking at their customer base, and they were starting to make some changes, okay? So I think what COVID did was really accelerate these changes that were already in transition for them, all righty? So I think that for companies who were already in the framework of thinking about what they're going to evolve to, this just accelerated that programming, that thought that they had regarding their companies.
Yeah, agreed. So let's talk about mental health a little bit, because that is just a big term, a big concept just in life in general. So when you're thinking about this in the workforce, let's define that a little bit. What does that mean, mental health?
Well, you know, remember when we were growing up, mental health was kind of like one of those taboo topics. It was something that you didn't really talk about. And for us growing up, mental health was kind of like hush hush. We don't talk about it. And if you didn't have what I would call the outward symptoms, whether it be learning disabilities, whether it be autism or some disability or something, you know, you were deemed sort of normal. Well, now you progress, right? And so what has happened, and largely due to the changes in our thoughts and to the changes in social changes in terms of how we address bullying, how we address some of the other nuances that have started to occur from a social aspect. And now people are grabbing onto that and recognizing that mental health is really about how I feel. It's really about how I feel at home, how I feel at work, how I feel in a relationship. And so I think what has happened is that because more and more people are talking about it conversationally, you
Yeah.
know, we're having coffee discussions about it, we're having
Yes.
drinks about it. People are starting to feel a little bit more comfortable with talking about it, and I think that's the first step in the right direction on this topic.
So what does this look like in light of COVID and in maybe one of our typical mold builder shops?
Well, you know, you may have employees that are anxious, feeling a little bit more stressed, feeling like I don't have control. I don't have
Hmm.
control over my family life. I don't have control over my work life. I can't control what I would call this unknown disease, right? And so that gets into your headspace, and then
Yeah.
you're coming to work and you're trying to focus. And no one knows what's going to be the trigger for the day, you know, or what's going to, you know, who's going to say something to you to set you off, et cetera, et
Right.
cetera. So I think what it looks like is a lot of anxiousness, you know, and stressors, you know, walking around your plant floor.
Yeah. Do you think too, it's kind of like anxiety where a lot of times you have these symptoms or, you have effects of anxiety, but you don't really feel anxious. Is it kind of like that? So people within this environment could be feeling a certain way, but not really even knowing it?
Well, you know, when you think about the statistics, and I did some research on this, and I found that 20% of people have mental health illness.
Hmm.
Okay, so most of us, believe it or not, you know, not most, but a large percentage of us are walking around with some type of anxiety or stressors. The
Yeah.
ability to, what I would say, talk yourself down or
Yeah.
walk yourself back is where the difficulties come in, right? So we might mask it very well at work, but it's those triggers that cause us to react. You
Okay.
know,
Yeah.
remember the terminology going postal. You know,
Yes.
so
Right.
so it was really about we didn't see this coming. You
Yeah.
know, that kind of notion.
Yeah.
So I that it's really incumbent upon employers to really be cognizant of this existence and to be mindful that I can only not to push so hard on the employee because we're in a very tenuous situation.
Okay. So, all right. So with COVID, people's anxiety about this is it really based in not feeling safe at work, things being uncertain, even economically? So talk a little bit about what you're hearing out there in terms
What
of
I'm
this.
hearing about is that you have two parent households where one parent has to make a choice,
Hmm.
all right, as it relates to the kids, you know, and who's going to
Yeah.
care and who's going to teach and being shuttered in. And do I let my kids, you know, meet with relatives, or do I let my kids have a play date? And how do we really start to, you know, course correct and recalibrate our lives to really adjust to COVID?
Yeah. I, but who can't identify with that, right? So do you think there's a difference when it looks at tackling this within a shop environment? Is there a difference, before we get into any tips you might have, between a
Mhm.
large company and like a small and mid-sized shop in terms of what's happening and how they should be handling it?
I think in a large shop, I think it might be easier for the employee to hide.
Mm,
I I think that, you know, in a smaller shop, you have more of that family
yes.
community. And so people are engaging with each other and really talking and have that family unit. So you might have an inkling that something is going on in Bob's life or something's going on in Sue's
Okay.
life.
Yeah.
But in a larger one, you may not. And I also think from a resource standpoint that, you know, A larger company might be positioned better because they may have an HR person,
Yes.
whereas a smaller organization may not have an HR person. At least the HR person might, understand and do her research around mental health and know the programs in the area and know all of the resources that the employee has. So there's a difference. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point about HR. So can you give us 1, 2, 3 factors like shop ownership or leadership or management should consider when approaching this issue within a shop environment?
I think that shop owners really have to know their employees.
Hmm.
They really have to know them as an individual, and understand the climate of the community and what's going on in your local area, and the issues. I think they have to get out in front of it by letting the employees know that they care, by addressing it in a town hall, for instance,
Yeah.
and really sharing with everyone that we're all in this together. Your problems are my problems, and
Oh,
the employees
totally.
feel comfortable to really discuss and say something. They have to understand that this is no longer taboo, that this is not, an incorrect statement to say at work, that you're running equipment, you are, touching a product that's going to a customer, so how you approach work has a lot to do with the sustainability factor for your employer, so that your work matters.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So what's the responsibility on the employee side of this? Because it can't just be one-sided.
You know what? The employee has to feel comfortable to outreach, right? They have to. If you feel like you are, getting into, I'm going to use Michelle Obama's term, a low depression,
Right.
you're just not feeling your happy-go-lucky self, talk to someone. Don't be afraid to really come out and say, you know what, I'm not quite feeling it today, right? Um, Most employees will just not come to work. They would just call off. I'm encouraging you not to call off. Come in,
Talk,
talk. Right,
communication.
right. There is a big wave of conversation going around this topic, and it's called notice, meaning that the employee and the employer have to notice that it exists. They have to talk about it together collectively, and
Okay.
then they have to act on it. You know,
I
Programs have to
like
be
that. Notice,
played,
talk, act. Notice,
note,
talk, act.
act. And there are resources out here. There is money allocated. The amount of lost productivity on this issue is tremendous. Tremendous. Think about it. You don't show up. I gotta kind of like figure out who I'm going to get in to replace you then,
Yes.
you know, or you just quit on me, you're in the middle of a line run and all of a sudden, things aren't going your way and you just quit,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
So, one of the things I have noticed during my client visits is that the millennials are
Hmm.
not putting up with this.
I was going to
They,
ask if there's a difference between the more
oh
seasoned. Yeah. Go ahead. So go ahead.
they will take personal time off. They know work-life balance. They know when they are hitting the wall. For the baby boomers, our generation, we were always taught to push through it,
Suck it up.
suck it up. Exactly. And so I think that the millennials have really helped us understand that we can talk about this.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great point. I mean, again, it goes back to that whole mentorship thing, Marion, where it's not
Yes.
one-sided. Both can learn from each other. So we need to step back,
Other.
acknowledge mental health as something you can talk about, because you're right. Back in the day, I mean, I'm one of those too that that's more something private. I don't want to show that I'm vulnerable. We need to get it out because in the end, it's what you just said. The cost of not addressing it is there are those hidden costs. Like it's going to end up impacting your shop if you don't acknowledge, talk, and act on this. That's the bottom line, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the scary part about it is that it's not going away.
Yeah,
because
not going away.
Life has changed for us.
Yep.
And so we are having more and more disruptions, whether it's the weather, whether it's the disease, whether it's, just your children's lives, etc. And so we are learning to manage what I would call more stress in our lives. All right. And so the rage that we all have inside of us has to be managed in such a way that we're still able to be productive.
Yeah.
We
So
all walk around angry.
yeah, I know, exactly. What do you say to the shop or company that doesn't have HR? What is something like, where does this just fall right to the ownership? Like, how can they, without going down that road, how do they tackle this?
Well, they have to think about, put yourself in your employee's shoes. If you're feeling angst, 9 times out of 10, your employees are feeling angst. So if you really start to think about it from a caring aspect, then you too will understand that, somebody, people are going through things. I don't want to make an assumption that you're not. So ask the question, ask for feedback, talk to your employees, be proactive, get out in front of the conversation. It's part of your culture. You can do it over the lunch counter, over the lunch table. You can make it, kickoff in the morning when you're addressing. Talk to the line supervisor, to help him to recognize, is anybody falling off on their task? Are you pushing people too hard? Be sensitive and cognizant. So I think awareness is just the number one fundamental thing that will help you in this journey.
Okay. I agree. All right. So in your opinion, related to this, in this whole COVID environment, you and I talk a lot about just the future of a mold building facility, mold building operation. So let's talk a little bit about what you see the future of that shop looking like, when it comes down to workforce development, if mental health is not addressed versus if it is addressed. What does that shop look like 10 years from now?
I think 10 years from now, you're going to find out that the shop is going to be more flexible. It's going to be more adaptable. It's going to be more engaging. It's going to act as one unit. It will not be an us versus them kind of notion. I think more team oriented in terms of everybody having input on how we get the work done. I think for those that that aren't agile enough to really be flexible, I think those shops will struggle. They will lose employees because one thing that we know about humans, they always care about the best place to go work, and they will go there. So they will leave if the culture is not meeting their needs. They will leave.
Yeah.
They will leave.
Yeah.
So
and that
generation.
Yes, and that ties what you and I've talked about over the past few years with the whole personality profiling, emotional intelligence. You said it earlier this morning, that knowing your employees. I visited a shop last week, and one of the partners that came up in the conversation. They're a 12-person shop. And they are going down that journey too. And it is all tied together. Like we talked about that before COVID hit. Getting to know your employees on that individual level, knowing how they learn, knowing how they communicate. If you were a shop set up already, which I think we're going to need to we're going to have to talk again, Marion, and bring some shops into this conversation to see how they are tackling it. Because if you are already on that path of getting to know your workforce, you're definitely addressing this mental health issue within the workforce totally differently than a shop that doesn't want to go down that path. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. And I tell you, creating a positive workplace where everyone is talking openly and honestly
Yeah.
and being fair in their treatment of humans, that's going to go a long way to
Yeah.
sustainability.
I agree. I agree. Well, Marion, we could go on for hours. I'm
No,
actually, we hit my target and I can't even believe it. So, but I am glad because we need to wrap this up. I want to thank you so much for your time today. We will be back again because you and I are always talking and the issue is not going away. So
no, it's
again, thank you, Marion, and everybody out there. Thank you for watching. And remember, for everything mold making related, visit moldmakingtechnology.com. And everyone out there, stay safe, stay healthy, and more importantly, stay informed and stay inspired.